Alright, so reading from Communism's Creek is going to be reading from the Outpost today. So, yeah. The Bourgeoisie Claptrap. About the family and education, indoctrination. About the hollow correlation of parent and child. Becomes all the more disgusting and more by the action of current industry. All family ties among the proletarians are torn asunder, and their children transformed into simple articles of commerce and instruments of labor and consumption. But you communists would introduce community of women, screamed the whole bourgeoisie in chorus. The bourgeois sees in his wife a mere instrument of production, an agricultural laborer. He hears that the instruments of production are to be exploited in common, and naturally can come to no other conclusion than that the lot of being common to all must likewise fall to the women. He has not even a suspicion that the real point aimed at is to do away with the status of women as instruments of production. For the rest, nothing is more ridiculous than the virtuous indignation of our bourgeois at the community of women which they pretend is to be openly and officially established by the communists. The communists have no need to introduce the community of women. It has existed almost from time immemorial. Our bourgeois, not content with having the wives and daughters of their own proletarians at their disposal, not to speak of common prostitution, take the greatest pleasure in seducing each other's wives. Bourgeois marriage is in reality a system of wives in common, and thus, at the most, what the communists might possibly be reproached with is that they desire to introduce its substitution for a hypocritical, concealed, and openly legalized community of women. For the rest, it is self-evident that the abolition of the present system of production must bring with its abolition of the community of women, of springing from that system, i.e., of prostitution, both public and private. The communists are further reproached with desiring to abolish countries and nationalities. The working proletariat, have no country. We cannot take from them what they have not got. Since the proletariat must first of all acquire political supremacy, must rise to be the leading class of the country, of the population, must constitute itself the population. It is, so far, itself, though a social body, though not in the bourgeois sense of the word. National differences and antagonisms between peoples are more and more daily vanishing, owing to the development of the bourgeoisie, to freedom of commerce, to the world economy, to uniformity in the mode of production, and in the conditions of life corresponding hitherto. The supremacy of the proletariat must cause them to vanish still faster. The united action of the leading civilized countries, at least, is one of the first conditions for the emancipation of the proletariat. In proportion as the exploitation of one individual by another is put an end to, the exploitation of one country by another must also be put an end to. In proportion as the antagonism between classes within the nations vanishes, the hostility of one country to another must come to an end. The charges against communism made from a religious, a philosophical, and generally from an ideological standpoint are not deserving of serious examination. Does it require deep intuition to comprehend that humanity's ideas, views, and conceptions, in one word, humanity's consciousness, change with every change in the conditions of their material existence? in their social relations, in their social life. What else does the history of ideas prove than that the intellectual production changes its character in proportion as material production is changed? The ruling ideas of each age have ever been the ideas of its ruling class. When people speak of ideas that revolutionize society, they but express the fact that within the society, the elements of a new have been created, and that the dissolution of the old forms, old ideas, keeps even pace with the dissolution of the old conditions of existence. When the ancient world was in its last throes, the ancient religions were overcome by Christianity. When Christian ideas succumbed in the 18th century to nationalist ideas, feudal society fought its death battle with then the revolutionary bourgeoisie. The ideas of religious liberty and freedom of conscience merely gave expression to the sway of free competition within the domain of knowledge. Undoubtedly, it must be said, religious, moral, philosophical, and jurisdictional ideas have been modified in the course of historical development, but religious, moral, philosophy, political science, and law constantly survive this change. There are, besides eternal truths such as freedom, justice, etc., such many ideals that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religions and all morality. Instead of constituting them on a new basis, it therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience, all idealism. What does this accusation reduce itself to? The history of all past society has consisted in the development of class antagonisms that take different forms at different epochs. But whatever form they may have taken, one fact is common to all past ages: the exploitation of one part of society by the other, by the slave master. No wonder, then, that the social consciousness of past ages, despite all the multiplicity and variety in displays, moves within certain common forms or general ideas which cannot completely vanish except with the total disappearance of class antagonisms. The communist revolution is the most radical rupture with traditional property relations. No wonder that its development involves the most required rupture with traditional ideas. Traditional ideas as in one nation under one God. This communistic revolution will have none of that, because that's dogmatism, and we smash it.